So I hope more yet to join, or I'll start right away. So yeah, today's class is decolonization, and we'll be diving into what is decolonization and introduction and its meaning and different perspectives of decolonization. Then what is colonialism? What did League of Nations do for decolonization? What provisions or what articles did it provide, and what is the method and process of decolonization? Like if colonies has to be decolonized and formed as a separate nation state. So there has to be a certain process. Like you cannot simply just call off, like we are taking off our power from you, and you now you're just supposed to live by yourself. So, but there's a process and methods for everything, and you can also question like why this process and procedures. Then we'll talk about like what is League of Nations role to play in decolonization, and next United Nations Assembly, what did it do for the decolonization? Then we'll look into like what are the famous decolonization revolts or revolution that has happened. Then we'll talk about the era or termship of decolonization. We'll be talking about from the time frame. We can call it a time frame. So time frame is pre 1918. This is because 1919 there's a League of Nations and end of World War. So this who all nations have got. Then after 1918 and the factors that contributed for it. Then we'll be talking about decolonization of USA, decolonization of Japan, decolonization of French, and the role of USSR and USSR and its anti-colonial termship. Then emergence of third world, we keep hearing it, or global south. Um, then the reasons for the emergence, as we all know, and effects of decolonization on the third world. Like decolonization was not just a golden spoon that the third world countries were given, but rather there were some difficulties for the countries to form or develop their own institutions, their own constitutions. So all those things, then that can be addressed in a framework and the summary. Okay, yes. So let's start. So yes, decolonization became famous in late 18th century. So it helped the formation of new states and the relationship with the global power. Like decolonization means the colonies that were under the powerful rule. Let's take European nations, like that is the biggest colonizer in the world. And also there's a term for the Britain colonies that the sun never sets, because they have colonies established from one side of the world to the other side of the world. So that's why they've coined the term that in our territory, sun never sets. So it helped in formation of new states, first thing we know, and their relationship with the global power. Like immediately the states have been formed and their termship with the global power countries, like how the different countries have what do we say, different countries have helped them set up things, or how they extended their hand in helping get them funds or get them the needed recognition. Then we'll talk about the downfall of Eurocentric and the global dominance in the world. That's the main cause. It is why. If you address, it is why, because it is mainly due to the world wars. See, this world wars has created a huge burden on Europe, and Europe, European nations, instead of see, it has colonized all of the world, right? So with the emergence of this world war and the internal conflicts, had let them focus less or little on the colonized nations. So where these colonized nations have started to have or enjoy this dominion status or transfer of little power to them. So this Eurocentrist world dominance downfall led to the global world to open up to a new scenario called decolonization. So it also created a political vacuum. Why? Because this disintegration of World War and economy of Europe led to only two sole powers emerge, which we call it as a Cold War era phase, right? The USSR and the USA, the two superpowers emerged, and the political vacuum was occupied by these powers. So this meaning of decolonization means disintegration of end of political empires and their radical dominance in the world. So if someone asks you what is decolonization, this is the best example you can, the best definition you can give as a Pol.Science student. So disintegration of end of political empires and their radical dominance in the world means this end of radical dominance led for the emergence of more new nation states forming. Especially we call them global south. This global south is an uh, it's a touche word. So we keep hearing it. We can call it third world or the global south. So this happened two ways. This happened in a two-way procedure. First one is happened decade after World War II. Okay, because slowly the nation, this Eurocentric dominant nations here, one to fourth point, they started to lose their little control over their colonies. So after the over a period, this deconstruction of the economy of this European nation was rumbling. They were struggling hard to keep up with the aftermath of war. Okay, because of the huge destructions they've had, the manpower they've lost, and also economies, the colonized economies have started to protest. So the income that it was having before the wars was like, it led to a huge destruction. So it was very hard for them to recover from such huge destruction. So colonies disintegrated and nation states created global south. So this is the term you have to remember. You should not be talking like a lame non-Pol.Science student. You should understand if someone asks you what is decolonization, you should say disintegration of end of political empires and a radical dominance in the world, which led to the creation of global south. Then second process, we can call it, it is a process of delegitimization of political rule, which practice the subjugated relationship between settled natives. So delegitimization of political rule means what? This, whatever the colonial country that was taking over the political sphere of the colonies. So this delegitimization has started, and this colonial power have slowly started to fade away or slowly started to decrease their what do we call conscious ruling, and the transfer of power has been happening. So this relationship between the natives and the colonizers have subjugated and led to the decolonization. So there are different perspectives of decolonization. We see decolonization have initially led to a other new sphere of literature. But here, as we are talking it from international relations perspective, we won't be dealing with the literature that decolonization have created. We will be just talking about the countries and why did countries go for decolonization, and why did what do we call superpowers encourage decolonization. I mean, what is in it for them, and why did this decolonization as in started just after the war? So like, why wasn't it done before? So Prasenjit Durai, he's an historian and a sinologist. He said decolonization is due to power change in the colonies rather than giving full credit to the colonial empire disintegration. Power change in colonies happened how? How means due to the colonial education and the little dominion status or the representation of the natives in the political sphere has started to think, have made them think that, okay, why can't we have this, our country ruled by ourselves? Why does it have to be in a colonizer, why does it have to be under a colonizer administration? Right. So this led to the change of power in colonies rather than the colonial empire disintegration due to the war after war. This is just the classes have evolved. The classes started to think that the logic. Why does he? Why do we have to be under the colonizers? Why can't we have our kingdom for ourselves? This thinking has specially led, this thinking changed how? With change in this new age youngsters coming into place, or change of the education that has started to make them think about new perspectives. Like it opened up a new perspective. Then decolonization means it is a method of colonial powers transferring institution and legal authority over their territories and dependencies to the original natives. Decolonization is nothing but transfer of a colonial power to the colonies, of where the natives have existed. Okay, transferring of all the institutions, legal authority, or political authority, like giving them the sovereignty. Sovereignty means they are the highest authority of their own land. They need not be represented by this superpowers and international institutions. They are for ourselves. Example, India. India, when demanded for full independence, British said that will give you dominion status, where the main institutions will be under our control, and you would be representing a democratically elected so and so. But we, as in, rejected that. We don't want dominion status. We want Purna Swaraj, like Sampurna independence, complete independence. So same like that, the other countries, colonies have also fought for their this legal authority and sovereignty. So what is decolonization? Decolonization is a method of colonial powers transferring institution and legal authority over their territories and dependencies to the original natives. Original natives are what? People belonging to that land, people of that land. Like we are original natives of India. So this, so like this supposed to be earlier, like colonialism. If you have come across, if you have come until this 20 minutes or so, yeah, 15 minutes of the class. So this colonialism means country is executing its sovereignty on a foreign land. So colonialism, who are colonial countries? Colonial countries are Britain. Britain is a colonial country. Then, sorry, Europe is a European nations are colonial countries. They are executing their sovereignty. They term themselves as authority in a foreign land. See, British East India Company came as a trade company. Then the Britishers, the Queen, uh, they are a country executing their sovereignty in India. India is a foreign land to them, right? So that's why that's what we call it as colonialism. Then League of Nations. You all know League of Nations was a peace organization established in 1919 after the World War One. So it said decolonization is a fundamental right of people of colonies and their right to self-determination. So it called for the countries must be decolonized and this dominance of European centric sovereign rule must come to an end. Why? I mean, why did it call for it? It says it's the right of the people, or it's right of the natives of that colonies. So it allowed political independence, but overall, it did not allow the all over independence. It said this must be transferred slowly rather than just like this whiff of a wind. So rather than this thing, it must be transferred slowly or peacefully, because there must be an established institution. Then power of transfer of power must be there from the colonial powers to the colonies. So this is either this process is both violent and non-violent process. So example, the violent Spanish Empire disintegrated in 19th century after World War II. Then the various colonies like Japan, Italy, these are the colonial countries. So Japan, Italy, Portugal, Belgium, France, Dutch, British, these colonies collapsed. So then the process and methods of decolonization, like how did it happen? You must have heard this question. See, we've been talking about decolonization. This must be done, that must be done, recognized by League of Nations. But this question must strike you like, in what way or what procedure must be followed in order to decolonize the country. So it is a process of getting political sovereignty for country where violence was also involved, which is called as the revolution. Example, the violent revolution I'm talking about, French Indochina and French West African nations, excluded Maghreb countries. These two have got their decolonization in a more violent method. Okay, it saw bloodshed, it saw transfer of power very violently. It did not pass on very peacefully, but Indian term is India, it's called non-violent method. It's by a global scenario, they call it Indian independent movement as a non-violent method. But rather during the partition, we call it the most violent bloodshed that we have seen. But if seen the procedures followed by the independent leaders, example, non-cooperation movement, quit India movement, civil disobedience movement, and 1947, this independence movement, these are all termed as non-violent movement because the methods adopted by the people are just to boycott or sit on roads or do satyagraha. Rather than that, we did not go for picking up of arms and fighting or doing a bloodshed with the colonizers. So why do we say that, when do we say that colonization has ended, right? Like colonization is a step-by-step process. When do we call a country is fully decolonized? Indian scenario also, when did we call it fully decolonized? When did we call it real governments are formed and recognized as de jure sovereign by the global nations? We see colonies, no matter what, still require the acceptance and the recognition of global powers. That's how international politics run. No matter what you are or what you are to yourself or the nation state, you must be recognized either as a good nation or a disturbing nation, but you must either be recognized as global powers. So this is something that should be taken into consideration. So when do we say that it has ended? This is a nice question, right? So real governments are formed and recognized as a de jure sovereign by global nations. So why do global powers help independence of colonies? You should have had this doubt, like, um, why would a global power recognize me as a sovereign state, and why would it help me if I would ever ask it, right? So why means we will dive into next slide. So there are three perspectives. Why does this global powers accept or help the sovereignty or the decolonization movements? Because empathy towards colonies, that's the first thing. Or the colonies also have the same ethnic uh, population or same identical elements like the population or the language or the culture that the colonies have in comparison with the power that has been recognizing it. The next one is diplomative method, means stronger nations to weaken its rival. Next one is diplomatic method. Diplomatic method is to what? Why would diplomacy come in? It's a tactical method. Why would example, India, why would it help 1970 liberation war of Bangladesh? Because it is a diplomatic move. If it's been a bone of contention, and India has been a bone of contention between East Africa and, sorry, East Pakistan and the West Pakistan. So India, by giving its diplomatic move in helping the 1970 liberation war, it in a way created Bangladesh, which parted its ways from the Pakistan, and this in a way weakened the rival enemy. You are getting the point, right? This is just my India self motive. So then to extend their influence, just to extend their influence, as example, recent wars, let us take in Ukraine and Russia, and the US has extended its help, saying that we would supply on behalf of NATO, that Ukraine will be given weapons and aircrafts, etc., and food aid, water aid, everything, health aid, because in a way, extending this in help would eventually help US to show up its authority in that region. After the war, if suppose Ukraine side has won, putting down the Russia, then USA can exert its influence all over the world, and Ukraine must, or at least would be bound by the rules and regulations. Also, example you can take this Chinese influence. It's giving loans and making the countries be debtful to them, and so that they can exert their influence and station their army. So same thing. If any international global power is doing or being good to you, it's just wanted to be showing their influence. It's just wanted to be like diplomatically good with you, so that you would be useful for them to exert their power in that geographical region. Then Haitian revolution against France and Monroe Doctrine. Haitian revolution is an interesting one. This is a bloodshed rebellion by the Haitian natives against the French rule, and they got their independence. But due to not so peaceful transfer of power, or no proper establishment of institutions, this Haiti was divided further into two more parts. So this, so that's why this mode and method of decolonization must be looked into. And Monroe Doctrine is about USA warned the European powers of them uh, extending their influence in the Western sphere, like Western sphere from US perspective, we are talking. Then League of Nations, if we talk about League of Nations, Article 22, it gave this Article 22 to organize colonies for self-rule. Like it recognized that colonies must be taken off and given their sovereignty, and they should have their own self-rule, because this is going little against their human right issues. I mean, what is the purpose of the colonial powers to be still upholding these colonies? Then aggrandizement movement of distribution of colonies. The aggrandizement means expansion of the colonies territory and redistribution of colonies of defeated powers. Like it said that if the colonies have, so the colonial powers have lost their powers, these colonies must be redistributed and they must be given their self rule. Then United Nations General Assembly in 1960 promulgated that all colonies to be declared independent. This is not easy, just as it passed a resolution, not as easy as UN General Assembly thinks that. On the basis of what? It says on the basis of self-determination. So after UN formation, the Trusteeship Council was specially established to look into the colonies, how they had to be decolonized. But as this article 155-56 just to talk about principle of self-determinant, they do not talk about freedom as a natural right. Then this trusteeship council cannot question or cannot be made responsible for the issues of economic, political, and social of the colonies. So in a way, the dominant powers are ordered to look into it. And if we analyze it further, as dominant powers are made order to look into this peaceful transformation of colonies, these dominant powers can exert their influence. So that is why we see in the previous slide that to extend their influence, empathy, diplomatic, to bring stronger diplomatic instruments. So this is all their personal agenda, personal gain. Also, the colonies were getting decolonized with the help of the global power who had much experience in establishing the government or the institutions for a smooth function. Example, but some, not all the colonies want to be decolonized. The French Guiana and Gibraltar, uh, they by referendum is given, voted by the people on certain issue. So they choose to be under colonial rule on. Then reasons for the decolonization. Why? Due to financial burden. Financial burden of what? Due to the inflation and post-war expenses have increased in these European nations, and why they wanted to be decolonized. Why colonies wanted to be decolonized? This is the quite common question. Like till date, they have not experienced anything. All of a sudden, why would they want to be decolonized? This is especially because due to electoral representation and total sovereignty. By this time, they might have given what do we call the dominant status. So they have at least had a taste to this political role by themselves and total sovereignty that they can rule their own nation. They do not need an external authority to looking into their sovereignty and also to get rid of foreign nationals and manage their own administration. Right. To pursue policies according to their ideologies, then to continue relationship with the erstwhile rulers. Some actually went for the monarchy. They made alliances with the previous ruler that they had been before the colonizers have come into picture. And with the help of rulers, they had the collective defense, military aid, and many more uh, relationships like establishing a power or making some laws or looking for socio-economic welfare of the citizens in the state. Then Canada, Latin America, and USA, as it said, they were never colonized. But there's a critic to it. Elizabeth Cooklin says that indigenous and local people never proclaimed independence. See, you might have heard this word Latin Native Americans, right? So Native Americans are the true people belonging to the land of USA, and the rest all they call them as settlers. So uh, the USA was never decolonized if you look into, because if it was to be colonized, then this Native Americans should be having their own authority. They should not be under this presidentship like democratic elections, etc. So in a way, this still uh, the third point, still undergoing decolonization. It's an interesting point, right? Like unless there are critics to an whole established theory, we wouldn't understand. Till date we've been, I mean, till now you've been thinking that decolonization is such a nice thing. Everybody's been doing it, but the true superpower, the big superpower dominant by USA has never decolonized, and it's still an undergoing going process. Then pre 1918 decolonization, this 13 American colonies against British Empire, and individuals have right to rebel against unjust. And they got their slogan was like individuals have right to rebel against unjust, and they got independence in 1783. This is a policy of self-government. Then New Zealand, Australia, Canada, they got dominion status. So in 1919, League of Nations mandated British controlled dominance over Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan, and also Ottoman Empire. So Greek was part of Ottoman Empire. You must have known by now. Got its independence in 18. This is pre 1918, like what have happened before 1918. And Balkanization. Balkans had their revolt against medieval kingdom for their liberty and all. Then Turkish Empire, total decolonization is completed by time of World War II. Then Britain, we've read before. Then France, Syria, and Lebanon were done. Then Italy, Libya was done. And Haiti, we know the slave revolution, 1791, against the French colony. And South America, it's a little longer, 1806 until 1826. These are all the decolonizations that have happened before 1918. And after 1918, this colonization accelerated the colonization across the globe because they started to look out. Um, then factors that contributed for this decolonization, we call it inflation because the war has just happened and the industrialization led to the much dumping of products in the markets. So the prices have been decreased because due to availability of many larger products in the market. Then the war of imperialism, then rise of middle class. Who are middle classes? The people who have been benefited through the colonial education and with the betterment of education, they've started to go out, earn, and their status have little bit improved. So this rise of middle class, they started to question things like why? Why do I have to be under you? Like these questioning led to one of the factor of decolonization, then racial problems, then agricultural advances with industrialization, you all know, and spiritual advances, especially the Buddhist Jain literature, etc. And the leaderships, example, Gandhi. Under his leadership, India started to 1920, if I'm not wrong, non-cooperation movement, then slowly lasted until 1947, total independence movements and transfer of power. And also this is an era of soft nationalism, and British also made deals for self-rule. Like British was not going to accept it did not accept all of a sudden or immediately saying that chalo will give you self-rule. Like that it did not do. It just made deals like let us slowly transfer the power. For now, let us what do we do? We won't move away from the colonies, but for now let us give you little um, what do we call it? Transfer of power or political authority. Will give you space to be represented in the uh, what do we call it? The political sphere, the assemblies and all. Then decolonization of USA. So Spanish-American War, 1898, and USA controlled territories, Philippines and Puerto Rico. So the policy of aggrandizement. Then Japan occupied Philippines after World War II. We'll have a timeline here. So this can be addressed in a timeline. Otherwise, this is little confusing. So 1946, Philippines gained freedom, but it did not get self-rule. It just got the status to the citizens to represent themselves in the politics. And they also got US citizenship, but they stopped paying feudal taxes. And 52, Puerto Rico got independence. And this UN Charter 67, 93, 98 citizen proposals were rejected in the House of UN due to that. They wanted the full autonomy transfer, but the proposals got rejected. Then decolonization of Japan. Interesting one, ain't it? Like Japan also had control over smaller or larger islands. So also interestingly, after World War II, Japan, after due to the post-war treaties, Japan till date did not have standing army. If you look into it, so the recent death of Shinzo Abe, he actually made for the radical changes. He wanted to have an established constitution, and this uh, the World War II era treaties must be abolished. They shall have their own standing military. So you can all know you can read the Shinzo Abe's that's another class. So Japan only ancient continent to become a colonial power, and it colonized Taiwan and Korea. It made its um, ethnic people to settle in the colonies, and also it made the Japanese as a must to be learned, and it stopped. Um, it put restrictions on Taiwanese and Korean languages. And after World War II, it occupied Vietnam, Hong Kong, Burma, Malay, Timor, and Indonesia. But 1945, after World War II, it surrendered its territories. But they still had an what we call bone of contention. This Kurila Islands was occupied by Russia, so this has been a contention between Japan and Russia. Next is decolonization of French. So due to French decolonization was an interesting one because the French failed to stop the aspirations or improving or rising wishes or wants of the native people. And active uprising went after World War II because due to their what do we call destruction of their economy or the or political thing in the after the World War II. Then 1947, Paul Randi voted against French in Madagascar. This is a violent revolution. Then these are French colonies we are talking about. Then 1945, Algeria, uh, Algerian wars. This started with Seti genocide, and 1990 marks the end of Algerian war, where it agonized both French and Algeria. Say 1945 till 1990. These many years, the war, the revolution to be decolonized have went on. The 1946 states of French Indochina withdrew support, and the war led by Ho Chi Minh. He founded French Communist Party. In 1956, Morocco and Tunisia got liberated. 1960, sub-Saharan African colonies got self-rule. 1990, Algerian War ends the agony of French and Algeria. Then USSR and anti-colonialism. Why? USSR is all up for abolition of Western colonial rule, either through direct or indirect influence. So why? And imperialism led to class stratification. They always say that the the accumulation of private property or the wealth has led for um, the differences or the class antagonisms. So this imperialism in a way led for the accumulation of wealth, etc., and led to the class stratification. So they are always against this colonial role by the Westerners. And the Cold War era, USSR supported freedom movements in the colonies because so that it can exert its influence and also it can help what do we call uh, it can be their diplomat, it can extend its diplomatic arm to this global south countries. It had its own agenda, so in a way it supported decolonization. Then emergence of third world. See, now these colonies have decolonized. This all have led for the emergence of third world, like the political vacuum that has created, and this third world countries have occupied. So, who coined the term third world? Alfred Sabe in 1942 coined the term third world. What inspired based on the word third estate? Okay, you have to remember this one. It's an MCQ, an important MCQ. So the non-aligned movement 1955 Bandung Conference created a platform for third world countries to come, the decolonized countries to come and express their issues, etc., and extend arm or help each other in the time of wants or needs. Then 1960 United Nations General Assembly proclaimed this declaration for granting independence to the colonial countries. I mean, it officially recognized that this colonies must be given independence. The 1961 Belgrade Conference announced the establishment of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, where the countries of third world have come together, formed an alliance which helped the other countries gain their independence or an helping hand. Then 1964 established UNCTAD, which led to the NIEO, New International Economic Order. So this NIEO was against the Bretton Woods institution, operated until why? Because NIEO special focus is to look into the global south. Okay. So this was operated we cannot say it was operated nicely also because uh, in NIO, this country, the groupism has started. So this groupism has started what? Like if countries are having the same interest, they have formed a group and they were opposing a proposal given by the countries, the proposal which was not in their favor. So in a way, this groupism, this bandwagoning of countries have started, and there was no proper, what do we call, cooperation among the countries on the actual issue. So this was operated until 1973 oil crisis, and after that, it was put aside and nobody was talking about it. Then the reasons for the emergence of third world, like the colonial education that led to increase of nationalistic feeling and logic evolved. You might have understood this. And Atlantic Charter. Atlantic Charter is what? It declared right to self-determination. So in a way, this was also an official document. Like if an official document has come up and saying that this colonies must be decolonized, then that would actually encourage the colonies to fight for their independence. So, financial wise, collapse led to the loss of wars. These colonial powers were not as strong as they were earlier. So, with wars, huge destruction happened, and they were focusing on repairing their internal um, economy or the political outrages that has been happening, and the colonies got assertion for independence, that like they wanted to be autonomous. They had this thought like, why should we have to be under a colonial rule when we are natives of our own land? We don't want some outsider to be foreign country to be ruling us. So then Cold War era. So Cold War era put a lot of pressure on European allies to grant independence, especially because it stated that there are only two powers, like the two dominant powers. So the rest of the powers had to surrender or take sides. So this in a way helped the colonial colonies to get decolonized. Then declaration by UN, it condemned colonies as it denies your human rights. This is this can be added to this 1941 declared the individual right to self-determination, but UN declared that it's against the human rights. You are denying their right to freedom. So this is an interesting one and a very tactical move by United Nations. Next, decolonized mutual support among nations. Example, India supported the reason uh, for African decolonization and the contentions. There has always drawbacks to decolonization. They did not see very smooth or soothing transformations. It had to look into either the transformations were violent or it was not so peaceful as it was expected. Then a lot of genocides it saw. And the financial collapses, of course, the immediate transfer led to no proper institution to look into, led for the colonies to disintegrate and get into a debt with the superpowers. And effects of decolonization. So effects of decolonization is decolonization on nations' identities. So effects of decolonization is are can be divided into five. So decolonization on nations' identities is the first one we'll dive into. National development plans. After colonization, countries to develop effects of decolonization on third world. What effect did decolonization put on a third world countries? I mean, what happened immediately after they have been decolonized or after they have been uh, given their sovereign powers? First one, on their national identities or nations' identities. What? It led for their to develop their own policies. Example, India also after independence, it put forward 5-year development plans uh, for its own economy to be growing, right? And opposition for holistic programs due to economic drain with no health care and education policies. Uh, Example, economic drain means the economy or the profits that the colonized nations the colonies have generated, they were transferred to the colonizers nation. So in a way, this was not used on the colonies. So they were deprived of their development, right? So if for that way, they had to focus on economic policies, healthcare policies, which were not recognized or addressed earlier during the colonial era. And foreign collaborations, this as you are by your own, and no colony is ruling you, and you need not go by their favorable country relationships. You can go for your own policies or have this friendly relationships with your example. India's neighborhood first policy, we went for, then we went for looking east, right? So like that, suppose we are talking from Indian perspective, it's an easy example. We also went for policies like that immediately after we got independence, and our foreign policies were been uh, very delicately woven. So this also led for the recognition of these new colonies in regional and international groups. They started to expand themselves as an sovereign states rather than going earlier by the colonial wishes. So recognition of own backwardness. Yes, due to the drain and the policies or the practices that we had, they had to recognize this backwardness could be a issue of development in future and must be eradicated. Then it accelerated private entry into gap of public economy. It led for the private merchants, private businessmen to fill a gap and take up the space by extending their funds or establishing their own firms. And the economy was back and running, and the money was safe inside the region itself. So next one is decolonization and state building. What happened? What happened is new colonies needed the state government, judiciary, executive, and infrastructure, then offices, everything to look for the developments and to proper functioning, to maintain the peace and smooth functioning of the state rather than Hobbes' state of nature where man is always under constant war. So decolonization on nation building. This is state building. This is nation building. Nation building is switching loyalty from colonial rulers to the new state. This was little harder one for colonists, the natives of the colonies. So it was nothing but to help them educate that they have to be from now showing their loyalty to their birth country itself. They need not be abiding by the colony monarchy, sovereignty, etc. Like you are a citizen of this country, you must be patriot enough to showing your patriotism only to this country. So it was actually built through flags, national anthems, national monuments, national sports, official languages, and replacement of like old what do we call old places names, like the road names to um, the names that we could relate to as being a citizen of this nation. Then decolonization on settled population. This was an interesting one. The colonial rule has not been like one odd day. It has been there for centuries. So the colonizers of their fathers, forefathers, ancient ancestors might have come earlier, and this new generation have been born and brought up here in the colonies. So this settled population actually they had this fear for this property which was accumulated by their by exploitation mostly of colony the colonies and their lives, and this dominance that they had to see by the native people. Example, Zimbabwe President Mugabe confiscated the land of white farmers and wealth and distributed, and ethnic minorities, this minority population we are talking about, ethnic minorities of Indians in Uganda was also an issue because of due to this uh, taking of humans from here as a slaves population to be settled over there, which led to an increase of the minority population from an outsider. They had difficulties, these people, because due to sudden transfer of power, the settled population did not know what to do. So they were um, fearing for their life. So they had to look into the things or alternatives, you can call it. Then next, decolonization on economic development. Uh, what we had seen all the political and the cultural strata before. Now, if you look into economic development, the new countries, new sovereigns needed banks to print their currency to keep their economy running and regulating systems. You can just not have what do we call? You cannot just not have example like a jungle raj. So focus, so we needed banks and the regulatory systems to keep everything at check, and focused more on industrialization, land distribution, and farming, and etc. Because these three things led for the proper establishment and kept the economy growing or going in a circular way. And many countries collaborated, both regional and economic organizations. This was an interesting one. This led to the creation of many regional and international organizations where the global south has played an interesting role. Example, ASEAN. Uh, it's an association of Southeast Asian nations, and ECOWAS, it's a community of West African states, and Gulf Cooperation Council, where the region neighboring countries have come together. They have established their own organizations to look into their issues, or to look into, or to extend a helping hand to the member countries, the third world member countries who were in much need. So these organizations were also part of decolonization, you can call it. So there are actually, and if you look into uh, example, this effects of decolonization on third world, you can understand it in decolonization on nations' identities. The next one is decolonization on state building. Then decolonization on nation building, decolonization on settled population, then decolonization on economic development. So this economic everything, this 5 points put together will help you understand how decolonization has affected the third world countries, right? So uh, if we summarize all these things, so by now you might have understood that World War II, it's an actual thing that gave to the establishment of United Nations, where United Nations recognized this, what do we call, decolonization. The colonies must be given independence because it is against their human rights. Human rights as a new concept has come into picture. So this World War II gave blow to the decolonization, and decolonization process have started, and UK, EU mostly was depleted, it was disintegrated, and it was hard for it to build the economy. So due to wars, also EU lost their authority in the colonies, and colonies thought that this is right time. Like our master is weak, so let us punch as hard as possible in the less possible time. So that's when the all colonies have started to look into this. After the World War II, they started the quick, the quick disintegration, the quick decolonization. Then it led to what? It led to Russia and USA dominating the world, and then the other scenario called Cold War has started, where these two powers have become the center of the movie, and the whole story was rotating around them, where which colonies would support them, which countries would give extend their arm in exchange for transfer of technology, industries, and uh, financial aid. Yes. So decolonized countries supported both USA and Russia. sometimes because they also played their game. We support at least one or both in exchange for the technology. We might take some hundreds of years to develop in further. And this led to the creation, this recolonization. Really, other good thing, it led to the creation of regional international organization that changed how global politics was viewed and how economies of the states have changed. And example, India nowadays, if you take India, India could have its status improved. It is seen as the the big brother mentality in the global south, that it's been a center of power scenario, the power exchange, or the power vacuum that's going to happen soon. I don't know. I cannot say how soon. So the power in future, India thought it can play its own cards. So it started to establish, or it started to show that it exists. Not just exists, but it roars. Okay. So this is what decolonization means, and the thank you card. Yeah. So this whole chapter is on decolonization, meaning, introduction, and different perspectives of decolonization, and how the decolonization has led for the emergence of third world, and what did the third world countries had to go through. That's what we read in this class. So see you. Yeah, you can ask if there are any doubts. So if there are no doubts, then we'll see tomorrow. Yeah.